Something just happened. All the power went out.
This is a quick intermission to say that you're going to want to stick around to the end of the video because it gets a little bit interesting. Also, I wanted to say a huge thanks to Dom for being my latest supporter on Patreon. Thank you, Dom. I appreciate it very much. If you guys are interested in supporting me on Patreon, there will be a link in the description below, as well as an affiliate link and discount code for one of these. Stay tuned. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Lowered Expectations. Thanks for lowering your expectations and hanging out with me here. I do appreciate it. Before we get started, a big thanks to everyone who reached out in my last video and wished me well. I appreciate all the support and the kind words. This is a Vevor plasma cutter. It is the model CUT-50P. I believe the P designation is because this is a high frequency start. Those of you who don't know what that means, basically most cheap plasma cutters use scratch start to get going, same as you would with a cheap TIG torch. You actually have to touch the torch to the workpiece to make the connection and get started. That leads to more consumable wear and less accuracy because it's harder to actually see what you're doing. And so I specifically requested this one once it became available. They do offer this model without the high frequency start, but it's literally just a couple of dollars cheaper, and I would recommend this one. I have some jobs planned for this in the future, but right now I don't have the time to get into those, and so we are going to be testing this on some scrap pieces of metal. I have some aluminum, mild steel, and stainless steel. In the aluminum and mild steel, I have some varieties of thickness, but the stainless steel, just a fairly thin sheet. So we're gonna test this. I am gonna push it past its limits, and some of the stuff that I have is about an inch thick. I don't think this is going to be able to cut it, but we'll see what happens. I'm going to be testing this on 120 and 240 volts because it is a dual voltage unit. I'm not going to go into great detail talking about safety or the setup of this machine or the specifications or any of that, but I am going to go over some of the basics. You're going to absolutely want to make sure that you have a pair of proper eye protection. So something that is meant for a plasma cutter. You don't want to get molten metal in your eyes, and you don't want to expose yourself to the light from the plasma. You also don't want to be cutting in an unventilated area. Make sure that you're either wearing some sort of protective mask, respirator, or you're working in a very well ventilated area or outdoors. You're also going to want to make sure that you have a decent air compressor. There are a bunch of things that you need to know about this before you get started. It's something that I would recommend at the very least reading the manual, and you probably want to go and watch a bunch of YouTube videos before you start using this. They're a lot of fun to use. They're really handy, but just like any other tool, there are dangers to it, and you need to educate yourself before you start playing around, or things could go really bad. I think I have 4 utility knives kicking around somewhere, and I can't find any of them. So I'm using a 7-in-1 or whatever you call this thing to open the plasma cutter. We can see that it is packaged quite well. It has this high density foam stuff that they are quite fond of using. I think this is an accessories box. I can't get it out, so we're just gonna pull the plasma cutter out. Oh, cool. Wow, that's light. And it's tiny. I love how small it is. I have very limited space here in my garage, and it's nice to have compact tools. They did a really nice job of packaging it. It has this high density foam on the top and on the bottom. You can see it did take an impact on the side here. That was on the side of the accessories, and it smashed hard enough there that it actually broke through the accessories box. We have the adapter that goes between the 240 and 110. We have the air hose, which feeds air into the plasma cutter. We have your earthing clamp, a couple of hose clamps and some screws. We have 2 things to hang the plasma torch from. I don't know if that's a mistake or if it's actually supposed to come with 2. I forgot to mention the owner's manual. We have whatever this is. Oh, we have some Teflon tape. A whole roll of Teflon tape. That'll do me a lifetime. Before we get into that, I'm actually going to look to see what's in here. Pressure regulating filter. Wow, I did not expect it to come with this whole setup. It's crazy. This is an automatic water drain that comes with this. That is pretty cool. Comes with a mounting bracket. So this probably gets mounted on the back of the plasma cutter. And a pressure gauge. I am actually really impressed with the quality of this plasma cutter torch. For the price of this unit, I expected this to be basically something that got the job done, but not much else. This actually appears to be a quality unit. It has a nice ball swivel strain relief where the cable goes in, and the rest of it just appears to be very good build quality. Oh, drop it first thing, Joel. Not going to be the last time it gets dropped, that's for sure. It has a nice safety mechanism on it. Normally I remove safeties because they're very annoying and just get in the way when you're trying to use stuff. But this one actually protects from, well, shooting plasma into your leg or through your fingers. But at the same time, it's very easy to use, very intuitive. It uses the standard consumables. I'll try to post it here. But these are the standard consumables that are used by hundreds of different plasma cutters, which is a really good thing because that means they are readily available and very affordable. I don't know what I called these earlier, but I didn't call them the right thing. They actually clip onto the torch. This is a standoff. You can use this to ride along the surface of your material, and that holds your standoff distance so that you can cut without touching the tip of the torch on the workpiece. Nothing. Oh, there we go. All right. Fan starts running right away. The Vevor plasma cutter does come with a 16.4 foot torch cable. The ground clamp wire is considerably shorter. I think it's a little under 7 feet. So that does limit you somewhat, but it is much more important to have a long torch cable so that you don't get caught up in it and trip over it. I don't think anybody doubted that it would cut through this sheet metal, but it does it like butter. Absolutely no problem whatsoever. I'm guessing that most of you watching this video have already watched videos about plasma cutters, but one of the very interesting things about them is because of the way they work, they don't actually put a lot of heat into the material. Now this piece is a little bit warm. It might be, I can hold it with, my bare hands. If I was to do this with a cutoff disc on a grinder, it would actually heat this part up enough so that it bubbled or blistered or burnt all this paint or powder coat or whatever it is away. Quite honestly, it's probably better to use tin snips to cut something this thin, but one of the cases where you would use a plasma cutter, or it would be handy to have a plasma cutter to cut sheet metal like this, is if you're cutting a hole or odd shapes. Just draw your shape and then you can come in with a plasma cutter and cut any shape, any size that you want. So let's see, we're gonna cut a circle and another circle, and then just for giggles we'll cut this oval shape. I'm actually not going to use the guide because I'm piercing through and because I'm used to not using the guide. This is going to be easier for me this way. When you're piercing, you want to do it at an angle so that the hot splatter doesn't come right back up into the tip. You also want to do it a little bit away from your cut line in a piece, sacrificial piece, so that you don't basically ruin the finish on the edge of your part. It doesn't matter for this obviously, but we're gonna do it anyway. So I'm gonna angle it at a 45-degree angle, pull the trigger, and then we'll move to our line. I don't know, I guess that could be a spaceship, a rocket, I don't know what that is, but I think we're gonna cut this out now and then we'll move on to something else. This is a piece of stainless steel out of a jet ski drive pump. We're gonna cut a little piece out of it just to demonstrate that this can. I am set on the lowest setting and on 120 volts. I'm having a bit of trouble with the HF start. That made extremely quick work of that, and as you guys can see, once again, not a lot of heat in the part. There is a small heat color line there, but I can literally hold my finger right there just seconds after cutting it. Even if I were to cut that with a cutoff disc, this would be too hot to hold my fingers right here. This is the thinnest piece of aluminum that I actually have, and just to demonstrate to you guys how little heat it actually puts into the material, I'm going to cut it with the plastic protective coating left in place. Ordinarily you would remove this so that it didn't leave any burnt crud on the surface, but I'm going to leave it on there. It is going to burn some of it, but we'll see how far it actually burns back from the cut line. Should be interesting. I honestly don't know. I've never done this before, but I'm doing it for you guys. If nothing else, I can tell you guys that this is very amusing. It's a lot of fun. All right, I moved a little bit slow there and got sloppy. Okay, that was better. I'm going to be honest, that is way better than I even thought it was going to be. I just cut through this, you guys saw. I gave time for the plasma cutter to turn off, and I can hold it for starters, which is pretty crazy. But also, you can barely see that it damaged the plastic at all. That is incredible. That's ridiculous. It is just so much fun to use. It is so much fun to just watch metal be vaporized. I am going to make a lot of scrap material playing around with this plasma cutter, I tell you that. That was on the lowest setting. I did have to regulate my speed some, and I did have to come back and cut a little section here that I went too fast and it didn't cut all the way through. This is 7.2 millimeters. So not far off from the maximum thickness that this is supposed to be able to cut. Okay, so at 20 amps, we're not able to cut through. We're only cutting about halfway through probably. I'm gonna crank it up now and we'll do a proper cut. No problem whatsoever. Perfectly clean cut. Okay, I'm gonna cut off Did I trip a breaker? Okay, it's tripping my breaker. I'm gonna call it and say that even though this is rated to cut 8 millimeters at 120 volts, at least on my 20 amp breaker, this is just not practical at all. 4 millimeters pretty easily, but if you try to cut 8 millimeters, yeah, you're just gonna run into problems. If you crank up the amperage in the 120 volt setting, it is just gonna continuously trip the breaker. I'm now switched over to 240 volts and we are going to continue on with this testing. I'm not going to go back and cut the thin stuff because there's just no point of it. If it can cut it at 120 volts and 20 amps, it's obviously going to be able to do that no problem in 240. So we're going to continue on with the 7 millimeter or 1/4 inch plate. I'm going to cut some slices off it, poke some holes through it, and then we'll step it up to some bigger stuff. It is rated up to, I believe, 12 millimeters, which is close to 1/2 inch. So we'll cut some steel and aluminum at that thickness, and then we'll kind of go into the unpractical side and start cutting some stuff that it's not recommended for. I am going to be wearing my 3M mask for the rest of this test. I am aware of this. They do kick up a lot of stuff into the air that you shouldn't be breathing in. And especially when I start doing longer cuts or cutting thicker materials, there's going to be more of that. I wasn't wearing my mask earlier because it makes it tricky to film, but I'm going to wear it from here on out. As the material gets thicker, it does hold a little bit more heat. As you guys can see, that is a very nice quality cut. And I'm able to hold the piece of metal very close to the cut. My hand is warm through the glove, but not terribly hot. And if you were to cut this with a zip cut disc or a oxyacetylene torch, this would be quite hot right now.
Wow, that was so easy.
So I kind of screwed up and put the clamp in the way a little bit, but as you guys can see, that was a pretty effortless hole. It's not as tidy on the back side, a little bit of slag, but a little cleanup with a flap wheel would make easy work of that. That is a really easy way to punch a hole in something. I now have some 1/4 inch aluminum as well as some 1/2 inch aluminum, and we're going to take a little slice off of these and see how it does.
Wow, that is nice.
As it is with welding, when you are plasma cutting, it takes a little while to get used to the material thickness and type of material that you're actually working with. I don't think it's as important with a plasma cutter, but it definitely makes a difference. I haven't cleaned up these pieces of aluminum yet. You can see there is a bit of slag hanging off of the bottom of this one. All in all, that is quite a clean cut. I don't know how the camera will pick up on that, but if you were going to be welding this together or something, or TIG welding it together, you would definitely want to clean it up more than that. But this is the 1/2 inch plate. I took 2 cuts of each of these to kind of figure out the speed. So it's not like I have, you know, decades of experience knowing how fast to go with 1/2 inch. I had the plasma cutter rather cranked up to 50 amps all the way on 240 volts for these 2 cuts. Hopefully you guys can see this now. That cut really well. There is an oddity right here because it went from cutting 14 millimeters down to like 7 millimeters and then back up to like 12 millimeters or something. But that is really good cut quality. I have decided that before I go to 3/4, I'm going to cut 5/8. This is 3 pieces of material, and it is about 16 millimeters thick, which is 5/8 of an inch. I think this has some zinc plating or galvanizing, and so I am wearing my mask, and I'm going to keep it on for quite a while after this. So if I talk to the camera, you'll hear a muffled voice.
Like this. Wow, that is impressive. We'll set that aside. We're going to step it up to 3/4 inch. That is actually really good. That is very impressive. I did not expect that. I wouldn't recommend this, but it can do it.
I've got a piece of what I believe to be 4140. It is 990 thick, which is 25.14 millimeters. And I'm going to try to take a little slice out of this. We're getting a little bit ridiculous now, way over the rating of the plasma cutter, but let's do it anyway. We basically reached the limits there. I was able to cut through in this one spot. I was watching it cut as it was cutting, and so I could move slow enough that it went through. But it's not at all practical to cut 1-inch material with this. As you can see here, when I wasn't watching what I was doing, it left a little bit of material left behind. Vaporizing over 3/4 inches of solid steel is pretty cool and really fun, and it is a pretty good demonstration of this machine's capabilities, but it's not actually terribly practical. What you're probably going to be using this machine for is cutting through 3/16 plate, cutting up some sheet metal, blasting holes through maybe the odd piece of 1/2 inch. But yeah, this is not going to happen on a daily basis. And if you are doing this on a daily basis, then this plasma cutter isn't what you should be purchasing to do that job. Overall, I am really impressed with this little machine. It is way more capable than I thought it was going to be. Not only does it cut through the 3/4 inch steel, but it actually made a fairly clean cut doing so. I figured it was going to be all jagged and nasty. I like the fact that it's very simple. It basically has one dial to control the amps, and that's basically it. It does have a regulator on the back where you control the air pressure, and I had it set to 80 PSI for this whole test. I like the fact that the hoses and the stinger, the torch, is very easily removable. And that way I can actually store this away without a cable sticking off the front of it. Throughout this video, I tried to make a mental note of things that I didn't like about the plasma cutter, and a couple of those things actually turned out not to be true. I thought that you actually had to use a wrench to remove the torch, and it turned out that I was getting upset about nothing. You can do that completely toolless. One thing that I did have a bit of problem with was the hose leaking. I tightened up the hose clamps with a Phillips screwdriver, and as soon as I plugged in the air, it started leaking. And so I had to come back with a 6mm socket and a 1/4 inch ratchet and tighten those up. After that, it was no longer a problem. If it is going to trip a 20 amp breaker, I think that they should limit the amperage to a point where it's not going to trip the circuit that it was meant to plug into. Hopefully that makes sense. That connector is too big. I don't like that. They really should have a connector that is actually sized to the size of the lug. That would make sense. I really don't like the units that they use on the air pressure gauge, even though I am from Canada and I generally work with a metric system. This is using kilogram force centimeters squared and megapascals. I don't understand either of those. PSI, please. Those are all the negatives that I can think about this plasma cutter. I personally think that it is an incredible value, and if you need to have one around the shop, or if you think it would be handy to have around the shop, there will be an affiliate link as well as a discount code in the description below. As you guys saw, this thing is actually underrated. I wouldn't recommend cutting 3/4 inch plate all day long, but it was perfectly capable of doing it. The downside is that because it is a bit underpowered for doing it, you do have to move quite slowly. And because the duty cycle on this is 30%, you would have to stop after a few minutes and then continue on with your cut. That being said, a high frequency start plasma cutter that is capable of easily cutting 1/2 inch for, I believe, $304 Canadian at the time of recording, which is less than every other currency in the world. So if you guys are interested, there is an affiliate link as well as a discount code in the description below. Go check it out. Because you were nice enough to hang around all the way to the end of the video, I'm now going to try something that I will be releasing in another video.
Whoa! Okay, it melts the glass, no problem. And also burn a hole through my glove.
Turns out that glass isn't the most ideal thing to cut, but for now I'm going to move on and try to cut some of this carbon fiber that I made, I think 2 years ago. Carbon fiber is a little bit conductive, but not terribly good conductor, so we'll see if it makes contact.
Whoa! That is bright. Holy. I think I need my welding helmet. Wow. What the? Something just happened. All the power went out.
Unfortunately, as soon as I power it on, it trips the breaker to the garage, which is a 60 amp breaker. Huh. That capacitor looks like it's fried. This is the capacitor. It has a giant bulge in the side of it. You guys may remember from earlier in the video when I showed you the big hole in the side of the box and said that the packaging probably took care of the plasma cutter because it has that high density foam. I'm starting to think that maybe it was handled a little bit too rough in shipping, and that's why we're now having an issue with the capacitor. I've got the plasma cutter put back together so I don't lose any of the bits and pieces. I hope to find some capacitors and get this repaired in the future, but I simply don't have time for it right now. Fortunately, Vevor has sent me a brand new plasma cutter, and I have been testing this one. I can confirm that it works exactly the same on 120 volts. If I turn it up over 20 amps, it does trip the breaker. On 240 volts, it works perfectly fine. I've used this quite a bit, and there is a pile of metal on the floor from some testing that I did on 120 volts. I wanted to see if I kept it at 20 amps, how long it would run before it overheated or tripped a breaker or did something bad, and well, it actually didn't. I ran the plasma cutter, that's about 32 feet of cutting. I ran it pretty much non-stop, only stopping for a few seconds along the way to check to make sure nothing was on fire in my garage. And yeah, it didn't do anything weird at all. This video took a very unexpected turn. Obviously, it didn't turn out how I would have hoped. The damage to the plasma cutter did happen after I was finished filming my full video, and the damage happened while I was filming some bonus clips. I'm not sure if it had anything to do with how I was using it, and I could have very easily just omitted this from the footage, but I decided that it was only fair to show you guys what had happened. Vevor did respond quite quickly and send me a new plasma cutter once they were finished with their holiday. And so, yeah, I have to say that products are going to fail, and how a company responds to that failure is very important, at least to me. I would still not be afraid of spending my own money on one of these. I once bought a welder, the green welder that you guys saw me shooting sparks at throughout this video. I paid almost $2,000 for that welder, and it failed shortly after. I had to send it back, and the company charged me $75 American shipping in both directions, and then sent it back to me, and it still worked exactly the same afterwards. So yeah, this sort of thing happens. That company did not treat me very well, I don't think, at least. And so that is my thoughts on that. This video could have been a whole lot longer if I went into more details about the capacitor damage and all that stuff. I had filmed enough footage that this video probably would have been 3 hours. It is long enough as is. None of us need that. I am still working on my house. I have received the funding so that I can actually live in the current space that I am. So that is wonderful news. Now all I need to do is figure out how to make money to actually pay my mortgage. So let's hope it is a profitable summer and I can continue making videos, entertaining you guys, and still have a place to live and food to eat. That is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.